The night I read the message on my husband's phone, my entire world stopped. It was from my best friend. At first, I thought it was a joke, but the words on the screen said something I could never forget. You deserve someone better than her. That, her, was me. This video contains a fictional narrative created for entertainment purposes only. All characters, names, places, and events in this story are purely imaginary. Any similarity to real people or real life situations is completely coincidental. The purpose of this content is storytelling drama and audience engagement. My name is Laura, and for most of my adult life, I believe that true friendship was one of the most valuable things a person could have. I believed that when you find someone who understands you, supports you, and stands beside you during the important moments of your life, that bond becomes almost like family. For 10 years, that person in my life was Mia. She wasn't just a friend to me. She was the person I trusted with my secrets, my dreams, and the parts of my life I rarely shared with anyone else. Mia and I met during our first year of college. It happened on a rainy afternoon when both of us arrived late to the same class and had to sit next to each other because every other seat was taken. At first, we only exchanged polite smiles, but after class, we started talking while walking across campus. Within minutes, we discovered how many things we had in common. We both loved late night coffee, romantic movies, and long conversations about the future. That simple conversation was the beginning of a friendship that would grow stronger over the years. During college, we were almost inseparable. We studied together in the library, complained about difficult professors, and spent weekends exploring small cafes around the city. When one of us was stressed or overwhelmed, the other was always there to listen. Mia had a confident personality that made people feel comfortable around her. She was funny, charming, and always seemed to know the right thing to say when someone was feeling down. Over time, Mia became a permanent part of my life. She knew my parents, attended family dinners, and celebrated holidays with us when she couldn't travel home. My family loved her because she always seemed kind and respectful. In many ways, she felt like the sister I never had. Years passed, and after college we both started building our careers. Even though our jobs kept us busy, we still made time to see each other regularly. Some friendships slowly fade as life becomes more complicated, but ours seemed to grow even stronger. That's why I never questioned her intentions or doubted her loyalty. Around that time, I met Daniel. Daniel worked at a marketing firm near my office, and we first met during a business networking event. I remember noticing how calm and thoughtful he seemed compared to everyone else in the room. While most people were trying to impress others with loud conversations, Daniel spoke quietly and listened carefully. We started talking about work, but the conversation quickly turned into something more personal. There was something about him that made me feel comfortable, almost immediately. He had a warm smile and a sense of humor that felt natural rather than forced. After that night, we began meeting for coffee, then dinner, and soon we were spending most of our free time together. Of course, the first person I told about Daniel was Mia. I was excited and a little nervous because her opinion mattered to me more than anyone else's. When I finally introduced them, Mia seemed happy for me. She greeted Daniel with her usual bright smile and joked that she needed to make sure he was good enough for her best friend. At the time, everything about that moment felt normal. Maya asked Daniel many questions about his job, his hobbies, and how we met. She laughed at his jokes and told funny stories about me from our college days. I remember feeling grateful that the two most important people in my life were getting along so well. As my relationship with Daniel grew more serious, Mia remained closely involved in everything. Whenever I needed advice about the relationship, she listened patiently and shared her thoughts. When Daniel and I started talking about marriage, Mia was one of the first people I told. She seemed genuinely excited. When Daniel finally proposed, Mia screamed louder than I did when I showed her the ring. She hugged me tightly and immediately started talking about wedding ideas, dresses, decorations, and locations. She offered to help with the planning and insisted on being involved in every detail. During the months leading up to the wedding, Maya became one of the most active people in the planning process. She accompanied me to dress fittings, helped me choose flowers, and even spent hours discussing color themes for the ceremony. It felt like we were planning the wedding together. On the day of the ceremony, Mia stood beside me as my maid of honor. She adjusted my dress, fixed my hair, and held my hands while I waited nervously for the music to begin. When the moment came for her speech during the reception, she spoke about our friendship and how happy she was that I had found someone like Daniel. Her words sounded sincere, and many people in the room were touched by what she said. At that time, I believed I was one of the luckiest people in the world. I had a loving husband, a stable career, and a best friend who had supported me through every important chapter of my life. Looking back now, I realized that some of the earliest warning signs were already there, but they were so small and easy to ignore that I never paid attention to them. Mia sometimes laughed a little too much at Daniel's jokes, even when they weren't that funny. Occasionally, she complimented him in ways that seemed slightly more personal than what most friends would say, but those moments felt harmless at the time. Whenever the three of us spent time together, everything appeared friendly and comfortable. Mia behaved exactly the way a supportive best friend would, and Daniel treated her with the polite kindness anyone would show to their partner's close friend. Because of that, I never imagined that the person I trusted the most could one day become the source of the biggest betrayal in my life. About a year after Daniel and I got married, life had settled into a comfortable routine. Our days were busy with work, responsibilities, and the normal challenges that come with building a life together. Even though we were both often tired at the end of the day, there was a sense of stability in our home that made everything feel secure. I believed we were happy, and I believed the people around us supported that happiness. Mia was still a regular part of our lives. It felt natural because she had been such an important part of my life, long before Daniel entered the picture. She often called to check on me, and sometimes she stopped by our house after work. At first, her visits felt completely normal. She would sit with us in the living room, talk about her job, laugh at stories from the past, and occasionally stay for dinner. But gradually, her visits began happening more frequently. Sometimes she would arrive without much notice, claiming she was already nearby or just wanted to say hello. I didn't think much of it because she had always been spontaneous. However, there were moments when her timing seemed strange. One afternoon, I came home from work earlier than usual and saw Mia's car parked outside our house. I was surprised because I hadn't spoken to her that day. When I walked inside, Daniel and Mia were sitting in the living room, talking. They both looked up when I entered, and although they greeted me normally, I noticed a brief moment of awkward silence before the conversation continued. Daniel explained that Mia had simply stopped by to ask how we were doing. I smiled and joined them, telling myself there was nothing unusual about it. After all, Maya had always treated my home like her second home. As the weeks passed, I began noticing small details that made me slightly uncomfortable, though I couldn't explain exactly why. Mia started asking Daniel more personal questions whenever we were together. At first they seemed harmless, but sometimes the topics felt strangely focused on our relationship. One evening while I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, I could hear their conversation from the living room. Mia asked Daniel if he ever felt stressed about married life. Daniel laughed and said every couple experiences stress sometimes, but overall he was happy. Then Mia asked another question that caught my attention. "Do you ever feel like Laura works too much?" she said casually. Her tone sounded light, almost like she was making a simple observation. But the question felt unusual. I paused for a moment while stirring the food, listening carefully. Daniel answered politely, saying that my job could be busy at times, but that he was proud of the work I was doing. His response sounded calm and supportive, and eventually their conversation moved on to another topic. Still, something about that moment stayed in my mind longer than I expected. A few days later, Maya came over again after work. We sat together on the couch talking about random things, but I noticed something different about her that day. She was wearing a perfume that immediately caught my attention. It was the exact same perfume I owned. A few months earlier, I had mentioned to Mia that Daniel liked that particular scent. I had only said it casually during one of our conversations. Seeing her wear it now felt strangely deliberate, though I couldn't prove that it meant anything. When Daniel walked into the room later, Maya smiled and asked him jokingly if he liked the perfume she was wearing. Daniel nodded politely and said it smelled nice. Mia looked satisfied with his response, and the conversation moved on as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside my mind, a small feeling of discomfort had started growing. I tried to ignore it because the idea of doubting my best friend felt unfair. Maya had been loyal to me for so many years that questioning her intentions seemed almost wrong. However, the small signs kept appearing. Sometimes Mia texted Daniel directly instead of contacting me. She would say she was asking about plans or checking if we were free to meet. Daniel never seemed bothered by the messages, and he usually told me about them. So I tried to convince myself that everything was innocent. But one night something happened that I couldn't ignore. Daniel was in the shower, and his phone was lying on the coffee table in the living room. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. In fact, I normally respected personal boundaries and avoided looking at anyone's phone without permission. But when the screen lit up with a new message, my eyes moved toward it automatically. The name that appeared on the screen made my heart pause for a moment. It was Mia. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the phone. Part of me wanted to ignore it and walk away, but another part of me felt a sudden wave of curiosity mixed with uneasiness. The message preview showed only a short sentence. "You deserve someone who understands you better." My stomach tightened as I read those words. The message didn't make sense to me. I tried to think of a harmless explanation, but none of them felt convincing. Why would Mia send Daniel a message like that? When Daniel came back into the room, I asked him about it as calmly as I could. I told him I had seen the message notification by accident and wanted to understand what it meant. Daniel looked surprised but not nervous. He explained that Mia had been talking to him about work stress earlier and that she was simply trying to give advice. According to him, she thought he had been working too hard and suggested that he deserved more understanding during stressful times. His explanation sounded reasonable on the surface, and he didn't seem defensive or secretive. Still, something inside me refused to settle completely. For the first time since our wedding, a quiet sense of doubt began forming in my mind. It wasn't strong enough to become a full accusation, but it was strong enough to make me start paying closer attention to the small moments I had once ignored. A few days after the strange message appeared on Daniel's phone, I tried to return to my normal routine. I told myself that I might be overthinking things. Mia had been my closest friend for nearly a decade, and Daniel had never given me any reason to doubt his loyalty. Still, the small feeling of uneasiness inside me refused to disappear completely. It was like a quiet voice in the back of my mind, reminding me that something wasn't quite right. I began noticing details that I might have ignored before. When Mia visited our house, I paid closer attention to the way she behaved around Daniel. Sometimes her tone sounded slightly different when she spoke to him. She seemed more energetic, more eager to keep his attention. When he told a story or made a simple joke, Mia reacted with laughter that felt exaggerated, almost as if she wanted him to notice her reactions more than anyone else. At the same time, Daniel behaved normally. He treated Mia politely the same way he always had, but there was no sign that he was encouraging anything inappropriate. That made the situation even more confusing for me. If something was wrong, it wasn't obvious from his side. One afternoon, Mia called me and suggested that we meet for coffee. Her voice sounded cheerful, and she said it had been a while since we spent time together alone. I agreed because part of me still wanted to believe everything between us was normal. We met at a small cafe we had visited many times during our college years. Sitting there again brought back memories of when our friendship first began. For a moment, it almost felt like nothing had changed. Mia ordered her usual drink and began talking about work, her coworkers, and some minor problems she had been dealing with. The conversation felt relaxed at first, but after a while the topic slowly shifted toward my marriage. She asked how Daniel and I were doing. I told her that things were fine and that we were simply busy with our jobs. Mia stirred her coffee slowly while listening. Then she asked a question that made me pause. Do you think your marriage is perfect? The question sounded unusual because Maya had never asked something like that before. I smiled slightly and told her that no marriage is perfect. Every couple faces challenges, but overall Daniel and I were happy. She nodded thoughtfully as if analyzing my answer. A few minutes later, she asked another question. Do you trust Daniel completely? Her eyes stayed focused on me as she waited for my response. I laughed lightly and said that of course I trusted him. Trust is one of the most important parts of any marriage. Mia smiled but didn't say much after that. Instead, she changed the subject and started talking about something unrelated. Our meeting continued for another half hour, but I couldn't shake the strange feeling those questions left behind. Later that evening, I returned home feeling slightly unsettled, but still unsure if my concerns were justified. Daniel and I spent the evening watching television together in the living room. He looked tired after a long day at work and eventually fell asleep on the couch while the movie was still playing. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of the television. As I reached for the remote to lower the volume, Daniel's phone lit up on the table beside him. At first, I wasn't planning to look at it, but the moment my eyes caught the name on the screen, my body froze. It was Mia again. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the notification, feeling my heart begin to beat faster. The memory of the previous message immediately returned to my mind. Part of me wanted to respect Daniel's privacy and ignore the phone completely. But another part of me felt a strong need to understand what was really happening. Slowly, and with shaking hands, I picked up the phone. The message preview was only a small piece of a longer conversation, but it was enough to make my stomach tighten. I unlocked the phone and opened the message thread. What I saw shocked me. Maya and Daniel had been exchanging messages for weeks. Many of them looked casual at first. They talked about work stress, daily routines, and random topics that seemed harmless. But as I scrolled further, the tone of Maya's messages began to change. She complimented Daniel often, sometimes saying things like how hardworking he was or how thoughtful he seemed compared to other people she knew. Some of the messages were sent late at night when most people would normally be asleep. My chest felt heavy as I continued reading. Then I saw a message that stood out more than all the others. "If you were with me instead, I would make you happier." The words felt like a sudden blow. My mind filled with anger, confusion, and disbelief. I couldn't understand how my best friend could write something like that to my husband. The betrayal felt deeper than anything I had experienced before. But before my emotions could completely overwhelm me, I noticed Daniel's reply. His message was short but clear. "Mia, this has to stop. I love my wife." I read the sentence again to make sure I understood it correctly. In that moment, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling angry at Daniel, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sadness. The message proved that he had not encouraged her behavior. He had actually tried to stop it. That realization changed the entire situation. The problem was not a secret affair between them. The real betrayal was coming from someone I had trusted completely for 10 years. As I sat there in the quiet living room, holding Daniel's phone in my hands, I began to understand something painful but important. My best friend had been trying to break my marriage behind my back, and she believed I would never find out. After reading the messages on Daniel's phone, my emotions were a mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. For several minutes, I simply sat there in silence, trying to process what I had just discovered. The person who had tried to cross the line in my marriage wasn't my husband. It was the woman who had been standing beside me through some of the most important moments of my life. Daniel was still asleep on the couch, unaware of everything running through my mind. I gently placed his phone back on the table and stared at the television screen without actually watching anything. My thoughts kept returning to the messages Mia had sent him. Every word felt like a reminder that someone I trusted deeply had been secretly trying to take something away from me. For a moment, I considered waking Daniel immediately and confronting him with everything I had seen. But then I remembered his last message to Mia telling her to stop. That message showed that he had already rejected her behavior. Instead of reacting with anger toward him, I needed to understand the full situation before making any decisions. When Daniel woke up a short time later, I calmly told him that I had seen the entire conversation between him and Mia. His face immediately showed concern, but he didn't try to deny anything. Instead, he sat beside me and explained that Maya had been sending him messages for a while, but he had tried to keep his responses short and respectful. He said he didn't want to create conflict between me and my best friend unless it became necessary. Daniel also admitted that he had recently been thinking about telling me everything, but he was unsure how to do it without hurting me. Hearing that made the situation clearer in my mind. Maya had been the one pushing the boundaries, while Daniel had been trying to stop it without causing unnecessary drama. That realization didn't remove the pain I felt, but it helped me focus my anger in the right direction. Instead of confronting Mia immediately, I decided to do something unexpected. I wanted to see how far she was willing to go. Part of me hoped that maybe she would stop after Daniel's message rejecting her advances. But another part of me suspected that she might continue trying if she believed she still had a chance. So Daniel and I talked carefully about what to do next. We agreed that the best way to reveal the truth would be to allow Mia to expose her intentions herself. If she truly believed Daniel might eventually choose her, she would probably try again. We didn't have to wait long. Only a few days later, Daniel received another message from Mia. This time she asked if he could meet her for dinner because she wanted to discuss something important with him. in private. She said she didn't want to talk about it over the phone. Daniel showed me the message immediately. When I read it, I felt a strange mix of nervousness and determination. It was clear that Mia hadn't given up yet. That's when Daniel and I made a plan. He would agree to meet her at the restaurant she suggested. But the dinner would not happen the way she expected. I would be there too. Not sitting with them, but close enough to hear and see everything. If Maya truly intended to confess her feelings or try to convince Daniel to leave me, she would reveal it herself without realizing that I was watching. The evening of the dinner arrived a few days later. My heart was beating faster than usual as I prepared to leave the house. Even though I knew the plan was necessary, the idea of seeing my best friend betray me face to face felt emotionally exhausting. Daniel reassured me that everything would be fine and reminded me that we were handling the situation together. We arrived at the restaurant separately so Mia wouldn't suspect anything unusual. I got there first and asked the hostess for a table slightly hidden behind a decorative wooden partition near the dining area. From that position, I could clearly see the table where Daniel and Mia would sit, but anyone at their table would have difficulty noticing me. A few minutes later, Daniel arrived and sat down at the table Mia had reserved. Soon after that, Mia walked into the restaurant. She looked confident and relaxed as she approached Daniel. She smiled warmly and greeted him, as if this were a completely normal meeting between friends. Watching her from across the room felt surreal because she had no idea that I was only a few meters away. At first, their conversation appeared casual. They talked about work and daily life while waiting for their food. Mia laughed occasionally and leaned slightly forward while speaking to Daniel. But as the minutes passed, her body language slowly began to change. She started speaking more softly, leaning closer across the table as if the conversation was becoming more personal. I watched carefully, my hands tightly gripping the edge of the table. Finally, Mia took a deep breath and said something that made my heart pound. "Daniel, I need to be honest with you," she said quietly. He listened without interrupting. Then she continued speaking in a voice filled with emotion. "You deserve better than Laura." Hearing those words felt like a sharp wave of anger rising inside me. I stayed seated, forcing myself to remain calm so I could hear everything. Mia slowly reached across the table and placed her hand on top of Daniel's hand. Her voice became softer as she spoke again. "I've had feelings for you since the wedding," she admitted. For a moment, the entire restaurant seemed silent to me, even though people around us were still talking and eating. I kept watching, waiting for Daniel's response while Mia looked at him with hopeful eyes, completely unaware that the person she had betrayed was already in the same room, observing every second of the conversation. For a few seconds after Maya confessed her feelings to Daniel, everything felt strangely quiet from where I was sitting. Even though the restaurant was full of people talking and eating around me, my focus was completely fixed on the table across the room. My heart was beating hard in my chest as I waited to see what Daniel would do next. Maya's hand was still resting on top of his, and she looked at him with an expression that seemed both nervous and hopeful. Daniel slowly pulled his hand away. His movement was calm but firm, and the expression on his face showed that he was not comfortable with what she had just said. Maya looked confused for a moment, as if she had expected a completely different reaction. Then Daniel spoke in a steady voice. "Mia, this isn't right," he said. She leaned forward slightly, trying to continue the conversation before he could say anything else. "You don't have to pretend with me," she replied quietly. "I know things between you and Laura aren't perfect." Hearing her say my name in that moment made my anger grow even stronger. For years, I had trusted this person with my personal life, my struggles, and my happiness. Now she was sitting across from my husband, trying to convince him that I wasn't good enough for him. Daniel shook his head slowly. "You're wrong," he said. "I love my wife." Mia looked shocked, but she quickly tried to recover. She leaned closer again and lowered her voice, as if she believed that convincing him was still possible. "You might think that now," she said softly, "but I understand you better than she does. We talk more. You tell me things you probably don't even tell her." Daniel's expression changed slightly. There was a hint of frustration in his eyes now. "That's exactly why this needs to stop," he replied. For a moment, Mia didn't speak. She seemed to be searching for the right words, trying to find another way to change his mind. Then Daniel said something she never expected to hear. "Laura heard everything." The moment those words left his mouth, Mia's face lost all color. Her confident expression disappeared instantly, replaced by confusion and panic. She looked around the restaurant quickly, as if trying to understand what he meant. That was the moment I stood up from my table. My steps felt steady even though my emotions were intense inside. As I walked toward them, Maya's eyes widened with disbelief. She stared at me as if she had just seen something impossible. When I reached their table, neither of them spoke for a few seconds. Mia looked completely frozen in her chair. I looked directly at her. Remembering all the years of friendship we had shared, the memories felt distant now, almost like they belonged to another life. "It's not what it looks like," Mia said suddenly, her voice shaking. Her words came quickly, almost desperately, as she tried to explain herself before I could say anything. "You misunderstood the situation," she continued. "I was just trying to talk to Daniel about your relationship." I stared at her calmly. "Mia," I said quietly, "I heard everything." She looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. For years she had been the confident one in our friendship, the person who always seemed to have control over every situation. Now that confidence had completely disappeared. "You tried to destroy my marriage," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but the seriousness of the words seemed to fill the space around us. Mia shook her head quickly, as if refusing to accept what was happening. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," she said weakly. Daniel stood up beside me. "Mia, you crossed a line," he said firmly. "You've been sending messages and trying to turn me against my wife for weeks." Several people sitting nearby had begun to notice the tension at our table, but at that moment I didn't care about the attention. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she realized there was no way to escape the truth. "I thought maybe you weren't happy," she said quietly to Daniel. "I thought maybe you needed someone else." Daniel shook his head again. "You were wrong," he replied. Then he said something that ended the conversation completely. "You're no longer welcome in our lives." Those words seemed to break the last piece of hope Maya had been holding on to. She slowly stood up from her chair, looking at both of us with a mixture of embarrassment and regret. Her eyes moved toward me again, but this time there was no confidence left in them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the apology came far too late. Without another word, she picked up her purse and walked quickly toward the restaurant exit. The door closed behind her a few seconds later, and just like that, 10 years of friendship disappeared. Daniel and I stood there silently for a moment, both processing what had just happened. Eventually, we sat down again, the tension slowly fading now that the confrontation was over. Even though the experience had been painful, it also revealed something important about the people in my life. Daniel had chosen honesty and loyalty when he could have easily hidden the situation from me. Mia, on the other hand, had chosen betrayal. In the weeks that followed, Mia never tried to contact me again. Some mutual friends later told me that word about the situation had spread, and many people were disappointed by her actions. Over time, she slowly disappeared from the social circle we once shared. Losing a friendship that had lasted for 10 years was not easy. There were moments when I remembered the good memories we once had and wondered how things had changed so dramatically. But I also realized that trust, once broken in such a deep way, cannot simply be repaired with a few apologies. Daniel and I focused on rebuilding the sense of peace in our home and moving forward with our lives. The situation had tested our relationship in an unexpected way, but it had also made us stronger. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't always destroy a marriage. Sometimes it reveals exactly who truly belongs in your life and who never deserved a place there. Thank you for watching this dramatic story of betrayal and revenge. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more shocking stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with friends who love suspenseful and emotional stories. And let us know in the comments what you would do if your best friend betrayed you. Stay tuned for more realistic revenge stories, shocking betrayals, and dramatic relationship tales coming soon. Remember, trust is precious, and sometimes betrayal comes from the people we least expect.